Tonight, we embark on an extraordinary voyage. Close your eyes and imagine traveling backward through time, not years, not centuries, but hundreds of millions of years into Earth's distant past. Our planet wasn't always the verdant world we know today. There were ages when continents drifted across the globe like ships on an endless ocean. Times when the air itself was poisonous to modern life. Epochs when creatures so strange roamed the earth that they seem like something from another world entirely. We'll witness the first brave pioneers crawling from ancient seas onto barren shores. We'll watch as life explodes into forms beyond imagination. We'll see the rise and fall of the mighty dinosaurs and the emergence of a clever little mammal that would one day build cities and dream of the stars. This is the story of Earth. This is the story of life itself. And in a way, this is your story too. Let's begin our journey. Part 1. The Empty World. Before life conquered the land. 635 million years ago, our planet was unrecognizable. If you could stand on the surface back then, you'd need a spacesuit, not because there wasn't oxygen, but because there was barely enough to breathe. The atmosphere held only half the oxygen levels we're used to today. The landscape would remind you of Mars, rocky, barren, utterly lifeless. Imagine standing on a coastline, looking inland. You'd see nothing but naked rock stretching to the horizon. Mountains worn smooth by endless wind. River valleys carved into bare stone. Not a single blade of grass. Not one tree. Not even moss covering the rocks. The silence would be absolute. No bird songs, no insect hums, no rustling leaves, just the wind howling across empty continents and waves crashing on lifeless shores. The sky might have been a different color, perhaps more purple or pink due to different atmospheric chemistry. The sun shone about 6% dimmer than it does today. Days were shorter too, only about 22 hours long, because Earth spun faster back then. But if you put on diving equipment and slipped beneath those alien waves, you'd discover something extraordinary. The ocean floor was carpeted with life, strange, wonderful, impossible life. These weren't creatures like anything alive today. They were the Ediacarans, and they looked like beings from another planet. Some resembled quilted mattresses lying flat on the seafloor, their bodies divided into segments like air mattresses. Others looked like ferns or strange flowers, fronds reaching up into the water to catch nutrients drifting by. There were creatures that looked like oval discs with radiating patterns, others that resembled segmented worms, and some that defied any comparison to modern life. Scientists still debate what many of these organisms were animals, fungi, lichens, or something entirely different that has no modern equivalent. These Ediacaran organisms simply sat on the seafloor, absorbing nutrients from the water like living filters. They had no eyes because there was nothing to see, no mouths because there was nothing to hunt, no legs because there was nowhere to run, no armor because there was nothing to fear. Why? Because predators didn't exist yet. The concept of one organism killing and eating another was still unknown on Earth. Life was peaceful, passive, gentle. But that was about to change forever. The world changes forever. But evolution never sleeps. Slowly, Incrementally, some organisms began developing new features, a slightly harder outer layer, a more efficient way to move, a chemical sensor that could detect food or danger. Then, around 540 million years ago, something revolutionary happened. Some creatures developed jaws, others grew harder shells. The age of predation had begun, and it changed everything. Imagine you're one of those peaceful Ediacaran creatures, sitting on the ocean floor as your ancestors had for millions of years. You're absorbing nutrients from the water, living your simple, quiet life. Then, one day, something new appears, a creature with grasping appendages and a mouth. Before you can react, not that you have any way to react, it tears you apart and consumes you. Suddenly, being a soft, immobile blob on the ocean floor became a death sentence. The peaceful Ediacaran world was shattered. Within a few million years, a blink of an eye in geological time, most of these ancient creatures vanished forever. Only a handful of lineages survived by adapting quickly. But from this crisis came opportunity. Life responded with an explosion of innovation, so dramatic that scientists call it the Cambrian explosion. Within perhaps 10 million years, most of the major animal body plans we see today appeared in the fossil record. This wasn't gradual evolution. This was a biological arms race happening at breakneck speed. Every generation, predators became more efficient at hunting. Every generation, prey became better at defending themselves or escaping. Creatures developed armor, hard shells of calcium carbonate that protected soft bodies inside. It's no coincidence that the fossil record explodes right at this moment in time. Before the Cambrian, most organisms were soft-bodied and rarely fossilized. After the Cambrian, hard shells became common, and suddenly we have an abundance of fossils. They grew spines, claws, and appendages of bewildering variety. Some developed the first true limbs. Others created grasping arms for capturing prey. Most importantly, eyes evolved, multiple times, independently, in different lineages. Once predation began, being able to see became a matter of life and death. Hunters needed to track prey. Prey needed to spot danger. The selective pressure was so intense that complex eyes evolved within just a few million years. The oceans transformed into a battlefield, an arms race between hunter and hunted that continues to this day. And this competition, this endless struggle for survival, became the engine driving evolutionary innovation forward at unprecedented speed. The strange seas of the Cambrian. Imagine swimming in a Cambrian sea 520 million years ago. Close your eyes and picture it. The water is warm and shallow, sunlight dancing through the waves above. The water has a slightly different taste, a different chemistry than modern oceans. Below you, the seafloor crawls with trilobites arthropods that look like oversized pill bugs with elaborate alien faces. They scuttle along on numerous legs, some as small as your thumbnail, others as large as dinner plates. Their compound eyes, some of the first complex eyes on Earth, sparkle like clusters of tiny gems. Trilobites dominated the Cambrian seas. They came in thousands of species, each adapted to different ecological niches. Some burrowed in the sediment, filtering food particles. Others scavenged dead organisms. Some were predators, hunting smaller creatures. Watch as a trilobite molts its exoskeleton, a process it must repeat throughout life to grow. The old shell splits open, and the creature crawls out, soft and vulnerable for a few hours until its new shell hardens. This is when they're most at risk from predators. Suddenly, a shadow passes overhead. You look up to see Anomalocaris, the ocean's apex predator. This creature is enormous for its time, nearly 2 feet long, though that might not sound impressive until you realize it's twice the size of anything else alive. Anomalocaris looks like something from a nightmare. Its body resembles a shrimp's, but its head is dominated by a circular mouth lined with sharp plates arranged in a ring like the teeth of a lamprey. 2 long appendages extend from near its mouth, segmented, flexible arms covered with spines that can grasp prey and pull it toward those waiting jaws. This predator swims by undulating the flexible lobes running down both sides of its body, creating a wave-like motion through the water. It's surprisingly graceful for such a fearsome hunter. You watch as it catches a trilobite. The appendages grasp the struggling arthropod and bring it to that circular mouth. The ring of teeth closes, crushing the trilobite's shell, ancient predation in action. But not everything here is threatening. Small, fish-like creatures dart through the water above the seafloor. These are among the first chordates animals with a supportive rod running down their backs, called a notochord. They're called picaia, and they're barely 2 inches long, translucent, almost ghost-like in the water. They don't look like much. No jaws, no fins, no bones, just simple swimming tubes with a stiffening rod down the middle and simple muscles that let them wriggle through the water. But they're your ancestors. From these humble swimmers would eventually come fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, and ultimately you. Every vertebrate on Earth, every fish in the ocean, every bird in the sky, every mammal on land descends from creatures like this. The Cambrian Ocean is also full of other bizarre creatures. Opabinia, with its 5 eyes and elephant-like trunk tipped with a grasping claw. Hallucigenia, covered in spines and walking on stilt-like legs. Wywaxia, armored with scales and spines, creeping along the bottom like an armored slug. Many of these body plans were experiments that ultimately failed. These lineages left no descendants. Evolution was trying out every possible design, seeing what worked and what didn't. Most didn't. But the ones that succeeded gave rise to all the diversity we see today, the first pioneers. While all this drama unfolded in the oceans, the land remained barren, completely, utterly empty. But that was beginning to change, very slowly. Around 475 million years ago, during the Ordovician period, the first microscopic organisms began testing the shores. Tiny algae and bacteria formed green mats along the water's edge, in the splash zone where waves broke on rocks. These pioneers faced tremendous challenges that would kill any modern land plant instantly. Ultraviolet radiation from the sun beat down mercilessly. There was no protective ozone layer yet. Temperature swings were extreme, from baking hot during the day to near freezing at night. And most critically, there was constant risk of drying out. Water is life. Every living cell needs water for its chemical reactions. In the ocean, water is everywhere, constantly available. But on land, organisms had to evolve ways to retain water, to prevent evaporation from killing them. But these pioneers persisted. They had to. The ocean was becoming crowded, competitive. On land, there was no competition at all. Unlimited space, abundant sunlight. If you could just solve the problems of desiccation and UV radiation, the land was yours. These microscopic colonizers began the slow, patient work of creating soil. This is something we take for granted, but soil didn't exist before life created it. Rock surfaces were sterile, mineral substrates with no organic matter. When these early colonizers died, their remains mixed with weathered rock particles. Bacteria broke down the organic matter, releasing nutrients. Slowly, generation by generation, a thin film of organic-rich material began coating the rocks. This was the first soil primitive, thin but crucial. Fungi followed, spreading across the damp surfaces. Fungi are remarkable organisms, neither plant nor animal. They occupy their own kingdom of life. They can't photosynthesize like plants, so they feed on dead organic matter, breaking it down and recycling nutrients. Eventually, algae and fungi formed partnerships, symbiotic relationships where both partners benefit. The algae photosynthesized, producing food. The fungi provided structure and helped retain water. Together, they could survive in places where neither could exist alone. These partnerships gave birth to lichens. Even today, lichens are among the toughest organisms on Earth. They can survive extreme temperatures, from Arctic cold to desert heat. They can endure drought for months or years, seemingly dead, then revive when rain comes. They can grow on bare rock where no other organism can survive. Lichens slowly broke down rock surfaces, creating more soil. They captured nutrients from rain and dust. When they died, they added more organic matter to the developing soil layer. For millions of years, this process continued. The layer of soil deepened, nutrients accumulated. The stage was being set for the next great leap, the evolution of true land plants. By about 430 million years ago, during the Silurian period, the first vascular plants appeared. These weren't plants like we'd recognize today. They had no leaves, no flowers, no real roots. They were just simple green stems, standing upright, using the sun's energy to photosynthesize. But they had a crucial innovation: vascular tissue. This is a system of tubes running through the plant that can transport water from the ground up to the photosynthesizing parts. It's like a plant's circulatory system. This innovation changed everything. Before vascular tissue, plants had to be small, creeping along the ground, staying close to water sources. But with vascular tissue, plants could grow tall, competing for sunlight, expanding into new territories. The land was turning green, and where plants went, animals would follow. Part 2. Coming Ashore. The Silurian. First steps. 430 million years ago, during the Silurian period, something remarkable happened that would change life on Earth forever. The first animals left the ocean and ventured onto land. They were arthropods, creatures with jointed legs and external skeletons, distant ancestors of modern spiders, scorpions, centipedes, and insects. But these pioneers didn't look exactly like any of their modern descendants. Picture an ancient shoreline. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The tide is going out, exposing mudflats and rocky pools. And there, emerging from the waves, comes a creature that looks like a cross between a crab and a scorpion, about 8 inches long, with powerful claws and multiple pairs of legs. This is a Eurypterid, sometimes called a sea scorpion, though it's not actually a scorpion. It's pulling itself out of the water, claws gripping the rough surface of a rock. Its armored body glistens in the fading light. Why is it leaving the safety of the ocean? 2 powerful reasons: food and safety. Look at the rocks and mud around the waterline. They're covered with a green fuzz, primitive plants and algae forming mats along the shore. In the ocean, these plants would be quickly grazed by numerous herbivores. But here on land, they grow thick and lush with no competition. For an arthropod that can survive brief periods out of water, this represents an unlimited food source. You can eat your fill without competing with thousands of other hungry creatures. And just as importantly, there are no predators on land. None. In the ocean, danger lurks everywhere. Larger Eurypterids hunt smaller ones. Early fish with powerful jaws cruise the waters looking for prey. The ocean is crowded, competitive, and dangerous, but on shore, nothing hunts you. Not yet, anyway. These early land explorers had advantages that made the transition possible. Their exoskeletons' hard outer coverings made of chitin did more than just protect them from predators. They also protected against water loss. A waxy coating on the exoskeleton helped seal in moisture, preventing the creature from drying out. Their jointed legs, originally evolved for crawling along the ocean floor, worked just as well on land. In fact, they worked better. Without water to provide support, an animal needs sturdy limbs to hold up its body weight. The arthropod's legs were perfect for this, and their book lungs, respiratory organs that looked like pages of a book, could extract oxygen from air almost as efficiently as gills extracted it from water. They just needed to stay moist. So these creatures developed a pattern. They'd venture onto shore during the cool, damp hours of dawn and dusk, when humidity was high and the risk of desiccation was lower. They'd feed on the abundant plant matter, and when the sun rose high and temperatures climbed, they'd retreat back to the safety of the water. But gradually, over thousands of generations, they adapted. Some individuals could stay out of water a little longer, some had slightly more efficient lungs, some had better water retention in their exoskeletons. Natural selection favored these traits. The individuals that could spend more time on land had access to more food and fewer predators, so they survived better and had more offspring. Those offspring inherited the advantageous traits, and over time, the population shifted. Eventually, and we're talking about millions of years here, some lineages made the transition permanent. They became full-time land dwellers, returning to water only to reproduce. The first true land animals had evolved, and behind them, countless other lineages would follow, exploiting this new frontier in different ways. Within 20 million years, by the end of the Silurian period, arthropods had diversified into numerous land-dwelling forms. The ancestors of millipedes munched on decaying plant matter. Early arachnids hunted smaller arthropods. Insects began their journey toward becoming the most diverse group of animals on Earth. The land was no longer barren. It was green with plants, crawling with arthropods, and ready for the next wave of colonizers, the vertebrates. The Devonian, when fish learned to walk. Now we arrive at one of the most important chapters in life's story, the Devonian period, 419 to 359 million years ago. Scientists call it the Age of Fishes, because this is when fish truly dominated the oceans and diversified into countless forms. But for our purposes, the Devonian is significant for another reason entirely. This is when our distant ancestors left the water and learned to walk on land. Let's set the scene. Picture an ancient river delta in what's now northern Canada, about 375 million years ago. The climate is hot and humid, think Louisiana Bayou on a summer day, but warmer, much warmer. There are no flowers yet, no grass, no trees as we'd recognize them. But there is vegetation. Thick stands of primitive plants crowd the water's edge. Some look like giant ferns, reaching 15 or 20 feet high. Others resemble massive horsetails or club mosses, their trunks thick and strange. These plants create a dense, tangled jungle along the riverbanks. The water itself is shallow, murky, and warm. It's brown with dissolved organic matter, all those plants shedding leaves and debris into the water. The bottom is muddy, soft, easy to sink into. Thick mats of algae float on the surface in places, blocking out the sun. And this creates a serious problem for fish living here. All that decomposing plant matter consumes oxygen. Bacteria breaking down dead leaves use up the dissolved oxygen in the water, creating what we'd call hypoxic conditions today. For fish breathing through gills, this is a crisis. Gills work by extracting dissolved oxygen from water flowing past them. But when oxygen levels drop too low, even the most efficient gills can't extract enough to survive. Many fish species simply avoided these oxygen-poor waters. They stayed in the main river channels, where flowing water stayed well oxygenated. But that meant competing with hundreds of other species for food and space. Some fish, though, evolved a solution. They developed a simple lung, just a pouch off their throat, richly supplied with blood vessels that could absorb oxygen directly from gulped air. At first, this was just an emergency backup system. When oxygen levels in the water dropped dangerously low, these fish could surface and take a breath of air to supplement what their gills provided. But over time, some lineages came to rely on air breathing more and more. They would regularly surface to gulp air, even when the water had adequate oxygen. This gave them a huge advantage. They could live in waters where other fish couldn't survive. These lungfish, as we call them, faced another challenge in these shallow, plant-choked waterways. The thick plant stems created a complex three-dimensional environment full of hiding spots. For a fish trying to escape predators or ambush prey, this tangled vegetation was both refuge and obstacle. Navigating through it with ordinary fins was nearly impossible. You needed something stronger, something you could use to push through the vegetation, to pull yourself over logs and through tight spaces. So their fins changed. Gradually, over millions of years, they became thicker and more muscular. The bones inside them became stronger, more articulated, capable of bearing weight and providing leverage. These lobe-finned fish, as scientists call them, used their fins almost like arms, pulling themselves through the vegetation. Some could even use them to prop themselves up on the muddy bottom, lifting their heads above water to scan for danger or prey. And sometimes, inevitably, their pools dried up entirely. The Devonian climate was seasonal, wet and dry periods alternated. During dry spells, shallow pools and backwaters would evaporate, leaving fish stranded in shrinking puddles of mud. For most fish, this meant death. But for lungfish with strong fins, it meant something else, an opportunity. If you could breathe air, and if your fins were strong enough to pull your body across mud, you could make a desperate journey to find deeper water. Those that couldn't make the journey died. Those that could survived, reproduced, and passed their traits to the next generation. And so natural selection drove the evolution of stronger fins, better lungs, and greater tolerance for time spent out of water. Meet your ancestors. Now imagine one of these remarkable creatures, Tiktaalik rosé, living about 375 million years ago in shallow Arctic waters. This animal was discovered in 2004 on Ellesmere Island in northern Canada, and it's one of the most important fossils ever found. Tiktaalik was neither fish nor amphibian. It was beautifully, perfectly both. A transitional form that shows us exactly how one major group of animals evolved into another. Let's look at it closely. It was about 6 to 9 feet long, impressive, but not gigantic. Its body was flattened, like a crocodile's, adapted for life in shallow water. It had a broad, flat head with eyes positioned on top, perfect for lurking just below the surface. It had scales covering its body, just like a fish. It had gills for breathing underwater, protected by a bony gill cover. It had a tail with fin rays, useful for swimming. But here's where it gets interesting. Tiktaalik had a neck. This might not sound revolutionary, but understand, fish don't have necks. Their heads are rigidly connected to their shoulders. They can't turn their heads independently of their bodies, but Tiktaalik could. It could turn its head to look around, to track prey or watch for danger, without moving its whole body. This is a land animal adaptation, useful when you're navigating complex environments. Its fins were extraordinary. They had the bones that would eventually become our arms, a single upper arm bone, the humerus, 2 forearm bones, radius and ulna, and even early versions of wrist bones. These fins had muscles attached in patterns similar to our arms, allowing for push-up-like movements. Tiktaalik could do something amazing. It could prop itself up on its front fins, lifting its chest off the ground. Try that with a fish's fins, you can't, but with Tiktaalik's fins, you could. Its ribs were also special. Fish have thin, delicate ribs that help move water over the gills. But Tiktaalik had thick, robust ribs capable of supporting its body weight. Without water to provide buoyancy, a land animal needs stronger ribs to prevent its chest from collapsing under its own weight. And while we don't have direct evidence, the structure of its skull suggests Tiktaalik had functioning lungs. Air sacs connected to its throat, richly supplied with blood vessels capable of extracting oxygen from air. So what did Tiktaalik do with all these adaptations? It probably lived much like a modern crocodile. It lurked in shallow water, its eyes just breaking the surface, watching for prey. When fish swam by, it would lunge forward, mouth agape, powerful muscles driving its flat head through the water. But unlike a pure fish, Tiktaalik could also venture onto mudflats. During low tide, or in the dry season when water levels dropped, it could haul itself onto land using its powerful fins. It could cross stretches of exposed mud to reach deeper pools. And crucially, it could rest on shore, basking in the sun, breathing air while its body absorbed heat. This would give it energy, speeding up its metabolism, making it faster and stronger when it returned to hunt in the water. Tiktaalik wasn't trying to colonize land. It wasn't abandoning aquatic life. It was simply exploiting a new opportunity, using both water and land to its advantage. But in doing so, it was paving the way for creatures that would make the full transition. About 365 million years ago, near the end of the Devonian, true four-legged vertebrates appeared. We call them tetrapods, meaning 4 feet. And while they retained many fish-like features, they had crossed a threshold. They were no longer fish, they were something new. Acanthostega was one of these early tetrapods. About 2 feet long, it looked like a large salamander with a fish tail. It had 4 legs ending in 8-toed feet, not the 5 digits we're used to, but 8, suggesting evolution was still experimenting with limb design. But here's the thing, Acanthostega probably spent most of its time in water. Its legs were too weak to support its weight on land. Its ribs weren't strong enough for terrestrial life. It still had internal gills for underwater breathing, though it also had primitive lungs. So why have legs at all? Because they were useful for walking along the bottom of shallow pools, for pushing through dense aquatic vegetation, for clambering over logs and rocks underwater. Legs didn't evolve for walking on land, they evolved for getting around in complex, cluttered underwater environments. But once legs existed, once lungs existed, once animals could spend time out of water, evolution had new possibilities to explore. And over the next few million years, some lineages would commit fully to terrestrial life, giving rise to amphibians and eventually to reptiles and much later to mammals like us. The transition from water to land wasn't a single moment. It was a gradual process spanning tens of millions of years, with many intermediate forms, most of which we'll never find as fossils. But creatures like Tiktaalik and Akanthostega give us crucial snapshots of this transformation. They show us that evolution doesn't work toward a goal. These animals weren't trying to colonize land. They were simply adapting to their immediate environment, generation by generation, following the path of least resistance toward better survival. But cumulatively, over deep time, these tiny adaptations added up to one of the most dramatic transformations in the history of life, the conquest of land by vertebrate animals. Why it only happened once? Here's a fascinating question. Why did vertebrates only colonize land once? Why hasn't some fish species in the last 360 million years repeated this incredible journey? The answer is simple but profound. The window of opportunity closed. When those first fish ventured ashore, the land was empty. No predators to eat them. Plenty of food, all the time in the world to adapt slowly to new conditions. But today, any fish that flopped onto a beach would immediately face thousands of specialized land predators, birds, mammals, reptiles, all far better adapted to terrestrial life. That poor fish wouldn't last an hour. The land is full now. The niches are occupied. Evolution doesn't give second chances. Although, intriguingly, evolution does sometimes work in reverse. Whales, for example, are descended from land mammals that returned to the sea. When competition on land became too fierce, they found new opportunities in the ocean. Evolution follows opportunity wherever it leads. Part 3. The Age of Giants. Part 3. The Age of Giants. The Permian catastrophe. Everything changed 252 million years ago. Earth experienced the greatest mass extinction in its history, the Permian Triassic event. Scientists sometimes call it the Great Dying, and the name is apt. Imagine you could watch this catastrophe unfold. In what's now Siberia, volcanic eruptions on an unimaginable scale begin. Not a single volcano exploding, an entire region of Earth's crust splitting open, releasing floods of lava that would eventually cover an area larger than Alaska. These aren't ordinary eruptions. They continue for hundreds of thousands of years, pouring out enough lava to bury Texas under a mile of rock. The lava itself kills everything nearby, but that's the least of Earth's problems. The eruptions release enormous quantities of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and other gases. The sulfur combines with water in the atmosphere, creating sulfuric acid that rains down, poisoning lakes and rivers. The carbon dioxide drives a runaway greenhouse effect, raising global temperatures by 15 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit. But it gets worse. The warming oceans begin releasing methane, a greenhouse gas far more potent than carbon dioxide from deposits on the seafloor. This creates a feedback loop. Warming releases methane, which causes more warming, which releases more methane. Ocean temperatures rise to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit in tropical regions. Marine life dies in vast numbers. The warming waters can't hold enough oxygen, creating dead zones. Ocean acidification from absorbed CO2 dissolves the shells of countless organisms. On land, the temperature and toxicity make survival nearly impossible. Forests die, plant-eating animals starve, predators follow. Even insects, typically very resistant to extinction, suffer catastrophic losses. The catastrophe lasts for tens of thousands of years. When it finally ends, Earth is nearly lifeless. 96% of marine species are gone. 70% of land vertebrates have perished. Even insects lose about 30% of their families. It was the closest life ever came to complete annihilation. Earth teetered on the brink of becoming a permanently dead world, like Mars. But life clung on. In refuges, in isolated pockets where conditions remained just barely tolerable, some species survived. And from these survivors, slowly, painstakingly, over millions of years, life recovered. The survivors inherited a nearly empty world. And the creatures that would capitalize on this opportunity, filling the vacant ecological niches, were about to make their entrance, the dinosaurs. The Triassic dinosaurs emerge. The Triassic period, from 252 to 201 million years ago, was Earth's recovery time. The planet was wounded, scarred, but healing. The supercontinent Pangaea still held most land in one massive block, stretching from pole to pole. Imagine looking at Earth from space during the Triassic. You'd see one giant landmass surrounded by a single world ocean called Pantalassa. Climate was hot and dry, especially in Pangaea's interior, thousands of miles from any ocean. Vast deserts covered much of the supercontinent, endless dunes of red sand baking under a merciless sun. The center of Pangaea may have been one of the hottest, driest places Earth has ever known. But life persisted even here. Reptiles, inheritors of the post-extinction world, diversified into countless forms. Some returned to the oceans, becoming dolphin-like ichthyosaurs. Others took to the air as pterosaurs, the first vertebrates to achieve powered flight. And on land, two major groups competed for dominance. Synapsids, distant ancestors of mammals and archosaurs, the group that would give rise to crocodiles, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs. Early dinosaurs appeared around 230 million years ago in what's now Argentina. They were relatively small, most no bigger than a large dog, and they weren't dominant at first. They competed with many other reptiles, and for tens of millions of years, the outcome was uncertain. But dinosaurs had subtle advantages that would eventually prove decisive. Many were bipedal, walking on two legs, which freed their front limbs for grasping prey or manipulating objects. Their hip structure, with legs positioned directly beneath their bodies rather than sprawling out to the sides, allowed for more efficient locomotion. They could move faster, with more endurance, than most competing reptiles. And crucially, growing evidence suggests many dinosaurs were warm-blooded, or at least had metabolism somewhere between cold-blooded reptiles and warm-blooded mammals. This gave them more stamina, the ability to stay active for longer periods, to hunt or forage in conditions where cold-blooded competitors would be sluggish. The Triassic also saw the evolution of the first true mammals, tiny shrew-like creatures that hunted insects at night. They were so small, so insignificant compared to the giant reptiles that ruled the day, that they seem barely worth mentioning. But remember them. In the dinosaurs' shadow, they were developing crucial innovations: fur for insulation, warm-bloodedness, specialized teeth, keen senses, and parental care of live young or eggs. These adaptations would eventually prove crucial for survival. The Triassic ended 201 million years ago with another mass extinction not as severe as the Permian, but still devastating. Volcanic eruptions associated with the breakup of Pangaea released massive amounts of CO2, acidifying oceans and warming climate. About half of all species went extinct, but dinosaurs survived. More than survived, they thrived. Many of their competitors vanished, and dinosaurs inherited the Earth. By the end of the Triassic, dinosaurs were becoming the dominant land animals, and in the next period they would reach heights of size and diversity never seen before or since. The Jurassic, when giants walked. The Jurassic period, 201 to 145 million years ago, was the golden age of dinosaurs. This was their time, when they reached the peak of their size and diversity. Pangaea was breaking apart now, splitting into separate continents. The Atlantic Ocean was opening, a widening crack between the Americas and Europe-Africa. Seaways flooded low-lying areas, creating shallow seas teeming with life. Climate was warm and humid worldwide, with no polar ice caps. Lush forests covered the land, but not forests like we'd recognize. There were no flowers yet, no grasses, no hardwood trees. Instead, cycads dominated palm-like plants with thick trunks and crowns of stiff, feathery leaves. Conifer forests stretched across higher latitudes, filled with early relatives of pines and cypresses. Giant ferns carpeted the forest floor, some reaching tree size themselves. And through these alien forests walked the largest land animals that have ever lived, the sauropods. Imagine standing in a Jurassic forest. The air is hot, humid, heavy. Insects buzz around you, dragonflies with 2-foot wingspans, beetles the size of your fist. The undergrowth rustles with small dinosaurs and early mammals. Then you feel it, a rhythmic trembling in the ground. Thud, 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 like distant thunder, but regular, relentless. The tremors grow stronger. Small dinosaurs scatter. Birds, yes, birds evolved during the Jurassic, descended from small theropod dinosaurs, take flight from the trees. And then you see it. A Brachiosaurus emerges from the forest. You have to crane your neck back, impossibly far back, to see its head 40 feet above the ground. It's like a living building, a creature so large it seems to defy physics. Its neck alone is 30 feet long, longer than a school bus. Its front legs are longer than its back legs, giving it a giraffe-like posture. It weighs as much as 10 elephants, around 80,000 pounds. It pauses, and you watch as it reaches up to strip leaves from the high branches of a conifer tree. Its teeth are simple pegs, designed not for chewing but just for raking leaves into its mouth. It swallows them whole, barely chewed, sending them down that impossibly long neck to a stomach filled with stones, gastroliths that grind the food like a living mill. This creature eats nearly 1,000 pounds of plant matter every day, spending 16 hours of every 24-hour cycle just feeding. It's like a living conveyor belt, processing vegetation into energy and growth. But Brachiosaurus isn't even the largest sauropod. Diplodocus stretched to 90 feet in length, using its whip-like tail which could crack like a bullwhip at supersonic speeds for defense. Argentinosaurs, living later in the Cretaceous, may have weighed over 100 tons, making them the heaviest land animals ever. How did they get so big? Several factors combined. The warm climate supported abundant plant life, plenty of food to fuel enormous bodies. Their bird-like respiratory system, with air sacs throughout their bodies, provided excellent oxygen delivery even to massive frames. Their hollow bones reduced weight while maintaining strength, and size itself became protection. A fully grown sauropod was simply too large for most predators to attack. Even Allosaurus, the dominant predator of the Jurassic, standing 9 feet tall at the hip and weighing 2 tons, would think twice about attacking a healthy adult sauropod. But young sauropods were vulnerable. Eggs and hatchlings were easy prey. So sauropods evolved a strategy: lay lots of eggs, provide no parental care, let the young fend for themselves. Most would die, but enough would survive, growing so fast that within a few years they'd be too large for predators to tackle. The Jurassic wasn't just about herbivores, though. Predatory dinosaurs evolved to enormous sizes too. Allosaurus roamed North America. Ceratosaurus stalked through forests with a distinctive horn on its snout, and the first giant tyrannosaurs were beginning to appear in Asia. In the oceans, reptiles ruled. Ichthyosaurs, dolphin-like predators with enormous eyes for hunting in deep water, cruised the open seas. Plesiosaurs, with their long necks and turtle-like bodies, prowled shallow coastal waters. Giant marine crocodiles lurked in rivers and estuaries. And in the air, pterosaurs soared on leathery wings. Some were small, sparrow-sized insect catchers. Others were large, with wingspans of 20 feet or more, soaring over oceans to snatch fish from the surface. It was a world dominated by reptiles in every environment. Mammals still existed, but they remained small, mostly nocturnal, living in the dinosaurs' shadow. Their time hadn't come yet. But remember those birds that took flight when the Brachiosaurus approached? Those descendants of small theropod dinosaurs? They were diversifying, developing new adaptations, slowly spreading into ecological niches. They didn't know it, but they would inherit the Earth one day. The Cretaceous, final chapter. The Cretaceous period, 145 to 66 million years ago, was the longest and final chapter of the Age of Dinosaurs. Continents continued drifting toward their modern positions. The Atlantic Ocean widened. India broke away from Africa and began its long journey toward collision with Asia. Antarctica separated from South America and drifted toward the South Pole. Sea levels were much higher than today, so high that shallow seas flooded continental interiors. North America was split in two by the Western Interior Seaway, stretching from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic Ocean. Mosasaurs, giant marine lizards, cruised these inland seas, hunting fish, squid, and even other marine reptiles. But the Cretaceous is famous for its dinosaurs, and with good reason. This period saw the evolution of the most iconic species, Tyrannosaurus rex, living in western North America during the very last million years before the extinction. This was the ultimate predator, 40 feet long, weighing 8 tons, with a head the size of a piano and jaws powerful enough to crush bone like breadsticks. Triceratops shared the same landscape, living in herds across the plains. 3 horns, 2 above the eyes, 1 on the nose, and a massive frill protecting the neck. Adults weighed over 12,000 pounds, making them dangerous prey even for T. Rex. In Mongolia and China lived Velociraptor. Movies made them famous but got them wrong. Real velociraptors were only about 3 feet tall, turkey-sized, covered in feathers. But they were intelligent, fast, and hunted in packs. Their curved claw on each foot could disembowel prey with a single kick. The Cretaceous also saw the rise of duck-billed dinosaurs, hadrosaurs, living in enormous herds numbering thousands of individuals. Some had elaborate crests on their heads, containing hollow chambers that amplified their calls, letting them communicate across miles of forest. And armored dinosaurs reached their peak. Ankylosaurus, built like a living tank, with bony plates covering its entire body and a tail ending in a massive club that could shatter the legs of attacking predators. But perhaps the most important Cretaceous development wasn't dinosaurs at all, it was plants. Flowering plants, angiosperms, appeared around 130 million years ago and spread rapidly, revolutionizing terrestrial ecosystems. Before flowering plants, forests were dark, somber places. Cycads, conifers, and ferns dominated primitive plants that reproduced slowly and inefficiently. But flowering plants had a revolutionary innovation. Flowers that attracted insects for pollination and fruits that attracted animals for seed dispersal. This created partnerships, co-evolution between plants and animals. Flowers evolved shapes and colors to attract specific pollinators. Fruits evolved to be eaten, their seeds passing through digestive tracts and being deposited with a packet of fertilizer. The spread of flowering plants transformed the world. They produced nutritious seeds, fruits, and nectar that fed insects, which fed small dinosaurs, and mammals, which fed larger predators. Food chains became more complex, ecosystems more diverse. And those small mammals, still living in dinosaurs' shadows, were paying attention. They were diversifying too, developing new adaptations, filling new niches, waiting for their moment. The day the world ended. 66 million years ago, on an ordinary day in what would become the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, something happened that would change Earth forever. The dinosaurs living in North America that day had no warning. The asteroid was 6 miles wide, traveling at 45,000 miles per hour, 60 times faster than a rifle bullet. It had been traveling through space for billions of years, but its journey was about to end. It struck with the force of 10 billion nuclear bombs. The asteroid vaporized instantly, along with a vast section of Earth's crust. The impact crater, later called Chicxulub, was over 100 miles wide and 12 miles deep. The immediate effects were apocalyptic. An earthquake measuring magnitude 11, far beyond anything in recorded human history, shook the entire planet. Every dinosaur within 1,000 miles died instantly, vaporized by the heat or crushed by the shockwave. Molten rock and vaporized stone blasted into the upper atmosphere, spreading worldwide. Some debris reached escape velocity, literally launched into space. This material would later rain back down, heating the atmosphere as it fell, turning the sky into a broiler that cooked everything on the surface. Tsunamis hundreds of feet high radiated outward from the impact site, crashing across North America's coasts within hours, then crossing oceans to devastate shores worldwide. But the long-term effects were worse. The impact injected 325 billion tons of sulfur into the stratosphere, enough to block sunlight for years. Temperatures plummeted. Some estimates suggest average global temperatures dropped by 50 degrees Fahrenheit within weeks. Plants died first, not enough light for photosynthesis. Without plants, herbivores starved. Without herbivores, carnivores followed. The food chain collapsed from bottom to top. Ocean life fared little better. The impact acidified the oceans, dissolving the shells of countless organisms. Marine ecosystems, already stressed, collapsed. Even plankton, the base of the ocean food web, suffered catastrophic losses. For months, possibly years, the sky remained dark. Ash and dust blocked the sun. Temperatures stayed near or below freezing, even in the tropics. This has been called impact winter, similar to the nuclear winter that would follow a major nuclear war. When the dust finally settled, perhaps after a decade, the world was unrecognizable. The great dinosaurs that had ruled for 165 million years were gone, not just T. Rex and Triceratops, all of them, every species. The only dinosaurs that survived were those we now call birds, small, flying species that could find enough food to survive. 75% of all species went extinct, but extinction wasn't random. Certain types of creatures survived more often than others. Small animals survived better than large ones. Burrowing animals survived better than surface dwellers. Animals that could hibernate or go dormant survived better than those with constant food needs. Generalists survived better than specialists. So small mammals, able to burrow underground and hibernate, survived. Birds survived, probably by eating seeds and insect larvae. Crocodiles and turtles, adapted to scarcity, survived. Fish and marine invertebrates in the deep ocean, less affected by surface conditions, survived. From these survivors, slowly, painstakingly, over millions of years, a new world would emerge. A world where mammals, freed from competition with dinosaurs, would inherit the Earth. Part 4. Our time begins. The Paleocene, after the apocalypse. For the first 10 million years after the extinction, a period called the Paleocene, Earth healed. The ash settled. Dust washed out of the atmosphere. Sunlight returned, warming the scarred planet. Plants came back first. Seeds that had lain dormant in soil germinated. Ferns, always quick to colonize disturbed ground, spread across the landscape. Within a few thousand years, forests were regrowing, covering the wounds. And into this recovering world, mammals exploded in diversity. For over 150 million years, they'd been small, mostly nocturnal insect eaters and seed eaters. But now, with dinosaurs gone, every ecological niche was open. Mammals diversified at a rate rarely seen in evolutionary history. Within 10 million years, they ranged from tiny shrew-like creatures to animals the size of bears. Every lifestyle previously occupied by dinosaurs was now filled by mammals. Some became herbivores, browsing on leaves and fruits. Others became predators, hunting the herbivores. Still others became omnivores, eating whatever they could find. Some climbed trees. Others burrowed underground. A few even returned to the water. Strange creatures walked the Paleocene world, animals we have no modern equivalents for. Gastornis, a 7-foot-tall flightless bird with a massive, powerful beak, was one of the top predators. It couldn't fly, but it didn't need to, with no large predatory mammals yet evolved. These birds ruled. Coryphodon was a hippo-like mammal that wallowed in swamps and rivers. About the size of a cow, with a small brain but a large body, it was one of the first mammals to achieve substantial size after the extinction. And in the trees, primates were evolving. Small, squirrel-like creatures with grasping hands and forward-facing eyes, they represented your lineage beginning to find its path. The Paleocene was a time of experimentation. Evolution was trying out new body plans, new strategies, seeing what worked in this post-dinosaur world. Many experiments failed. Most Paleocene mammals have no living descendants, but the successful ones would give rise to all modern mammal diversity. The Eocene, the hothouse. Around 56 million years ago, temperatures spiked dramatically. A massive release of carbon dioxide and methane, possibly from volcanic eruptions, possibly from methane deposits on the seafloor, triggered rapid warming. This event, called the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, raised global temperatures by 9 to 14 degrees Fahrenheit in just a few thousand years. The Eocene epoch began, and for 22 million years, Earth was a hothouse world unlike anything humans have experienced. Average global temperature was about 85 degrees Fahrenheit compared to 58 degrees today. palm trees grew in Alaska. Crocodiles swam in the Arctic, which was so warm that temperatures never dropped below freezing even in winter. There were no polar ice caps at all. Sea levels were over 500 feet higher than today, flooding low-lying areas and creating vast shallow seas. Tropical and subtropical forests stretched from pole to pole. Only the highest mountain peaks remained cool. The diversity of life exploded in these warm, wet conditions. And in these lush forests, primates thrived. They developed larger brains for navigating complex three-dimensional environments. They developed grasping hands with opposable thumbs, perfect for climbing and manipulating objects. They developed forward-facing eyes that provided depth perception crucial for judging distances when leaping from branch to branch. Early primates split into two major groups. One would eventually give rise to lemurs and lorises, the prosimians. The other would give rise to monkeys, apes, and eventually humans. Meanwhile, other mammal lineages were taking unexpected evolutionary paths. Some ancient hoofed mammals began spending more time in water. Over millions of years, their bodies adapted, legs becoming shorter, tails becoming flukes, nostrils moving to the top of the head. Eventually, they couldn't walk on land at all. They had become whales, one of evolution's most dramatic transformations. This is a crucial point about evolution. It's not unidirectional. It doesn't always move forward or toward greater complexity. Whale ancestors gave up legs and lungs for walking and breathing air, returning to the sea their distant ancestors had left hundreds of millions of years earlier. Evolution follows opportunity, wherever it leads. The Eocene also saw the evolution of horses, though early horses didn't look like modern horses at all. Hyracotherium, sometimes called Eohippus or dawn horse, was the size of a fox terrier, with 4 toes on its front feet and 3 on the back. It lived in forests, browsing on soft leaves. The large, single-hooved horses we know today wouldn't evolve for tens of millions of years. Bats appeared during the Eocene, the only mammals ever to evolve true powered flight. Early bats looked remarkably similar to modern ones, suggesting the basic bat body plan was perfected early and changed little since. The great cooling begins, but nothing lasts forever. Around 34 million years ago, at the boundary between the Eocene and Oligocene epochs, Earth's climate changed dramatically and suddenly. Multiple factors combined to trigger this transformation. Mountain ranges rose as continents collided. The Himalayas began their rise as India crashed into Asia. The Alps formed as Africa pushed into Europe. The Rockies continued growing in North America. These mountains altered atmospheric circulation, blocking warm, moist air and creating rain shadows. Ocean currents shifted as continents drifted. Crucially, South America separated from Antarctica, allowing the Antarctic Circumpolar Current to form a ring of cold water circling Antarctica, isolating it thermally from warmer waters to the north. And a new type of photosynthesis evolved in plants, seafloor photosynthesis, more efficient than the previous C3 type, especially in hot, dry conditions. These plants spread rapidly, removing more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, weakening the greenhouse effect. The combined effect was dramatic. Within a few 100,000 years, rapid in geological terms, average global temperatures dropped by about 13 degrees Fahrenheit. Antarctica, which had been forested, began accumulating ice. Within 1,000,000 years, the continent was covered by an ice sheet miles thick. This ice sheet reflected sunlight back into space, cooling Earth further, a positive feedback loop. The warmer greenhouse world of the Eocene was ending. Earth was entering a colder phase that continues to this day. Africa's Great Transformation. Fast forward to 7 million years ago. Africa was changing. The climate was becoming drier, driven by shifts in atmospheric circulation and the continued rise of mountains. The great forests that had covered much of the continent were shrinking, fragmenting. In their place, grasslands were expanding savannas, vast plains dotted with occasional trees stretching to the horizon. This climate shift was catastrophic for forest specialists. Creatures adapted to life in dense forests suddenly found their habitat disappearing. Many species went extinct. But for one particular lineage of apes living in East Africa, this crisis created opportunity. These apes already had certain pre-adaptations that would prove crucial. They already walked upright occasionally. Most apes can stand and walk on two legs for short periods when reaching for fruit or trying to see over obstacles. They already used simple tools. Chimpanzees today use sticks to fish for termites and rocks to crack nuts. They already lived in social groups with complex relationships. But in the savannah, these traits became crucial for survival. Standing upright allowed them to see over tall grass, spotting both predators and prey from a distance. Walking on two legs was more energy efficient for covering the long distances between food sources in open country. Freed hands could carry tools, weapons, food, and eventually infants, allowing females to have shorter intervals between births. Most importantly, the savanna required intelligence. Forest apes could rely on relatively predictable food sources, fruit trees that fruited on regular schedules. But savanna dwellers needed to track animal migrations, remember waterhole locations across vast territories, coordinate group hunting, and share complex information about resources and dangers. The savanna selected for larger brains. Over millions of years, these pressures shaped our ancestors, driving them toward becoming something new, something that wasn't quite ape anymore, something approaching human. Meet your family. Let me introduce you to some of your relatives, the members of your family tree stretching back millions of years. 4 to 6 million years ago lived creatures like Sahelanthropus and Aurorin. We have only fragments, skulls, pieces of leg bones, but they tell a story. These were apes, definitely apes, but apes that walked upright more often than their cousins. Their skulls suggest brains only slightly larger than chimpanzees, but the position of the spine attachment shows bipedal posture. Around 4 million years ago, Australopithecus emerged. Lucy, the famous skeleton found in Ethiopia, belonged to Australopithecus afarensis. She was about 3.5 feet tall, weighing maybe 60 pounds. Her brain was chimp-sized, about 430 cubic centimeters. But her pelvis, her knee joints, her foot bones all show she walked upright as her primary mode of locomotion. Australopithecus lived in small family groups, probably 20 to 30 individuals. They used simple stone tools, just rocks with sharp edges, useful for cutting meat or breaking bones to extract marrow. They probably couldn't control fire yet. They lived mostly on plants, fruits, seeds, roots, but opportunistically scavenged meat when they found it. Their lives were short and hard. Most died before age 30. Predators were a constant threat. Big cats, ancestors of lions and leopards, hunted them. Hyenas scavenged their kills and occasionally killed them directly. Even large eagles could snatch children. 2 million years ago, Homo habilis appeared, handyman, named for their more sophisticated tool use. Brains were larger now, about 600 cubic centimeters. They were taller, around 4.5 feet. They made Alduin tools, simple but effective stone choppers and scrapers, clearly crafted with intent and skill. Homo habilis probably scavenged more actively than Australopithecus, using tools to butcher carcasses before other scavengers arrived. They may have used rocks to crack bones, accessing the nutritious marrow that hyenas couldn't reach. 1.5 million years ago, Homo erectus emerged. This was a game changer. They were tall, 5 to 6 feet. Brain size jumped to 900 cubic centimeters, approaching 2/3 of modern human brain size. They made sophisticated hand axes, symmetrical, carefully crafted tools that required planning and skill. And, most importantly, Homo erectus controlled fire. This changed everything. Fire provided warmth, protection from predators, light to extend the day, but, most crucially, fire allowed cooking. Cooked food is easier to digest, providing more calories with less effort. Cooking partially breaks down tough plant fibers and denatures proteins, essentially pre-digesting food. This freed up energy that would have gone to digestion, making it available for other purposes like running larger brains. Homo erectus spread beyond Africa, becoming the first human species to inhabit multiple continents. Their fossils are found in Africa, Asia, and Europe. They thrived for over 1.5 million years, the longest-lived human species. Around 700,000 years ago, populations of Homo erectus in different regions began diverging. In Europe, they evolved into Homo heidelbergensis, which would give rise to Neanderthals. In Africa, they evolved along a different path that would eventually lead to us. 300,000 years ago, in Africa, Homo sapiens emerged. That's us, anatomically modern humans, taller than Homo erectus, with larger brains averaging 1,350 cubic centimeters. Lighter build, less robust bones, smaller teeth and jaws. But the real difference wasn't physical, it was cognitive. Homo sapiens developed symbolic thinking, abstract reasoning, complex language. We created art, burying our dead with ceremony and grave goods, suggesting belief in an afterlife. We made jewelry, sewn clothing, elaborate tools. We weren't the only humans, though. When Homo sapiens first evolved, we shared the world with multiple other human species. Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, strong, stocky, with brains as large as ours or larger. Denisovans in Eastern Asia, known mainly from DNA extracted from a few bone fragments found in a Siberian cave. Homo floresiensis, the hobbits, 3-foot-tall humans living on Indonesian islands, and probably others we haven't discovered yet. These were all true humans, intelligent, tool-using, social, with language and culture. They weren't inferior to us. In some ways, they had advantages. Neanderthals were physically stronger, better adapted to Ice Age Europe. Denisovans had genetic adaptations for high altitude that modern Tibetans inherited. But Homo sapiens had one crucial advantage: behavioral flexibility. We were generalists, able to adapt to almost any environment. We could live in Arctic tundra, tropical rainforest, desert, mountains, islands, anywhere. And over tens of thousands of years, we spread across the globe. When we met other human species, the results varied. Sometimes we competed, probably violently. Sometimes we interbred. Most modern humans carry 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA, and some carry Denisovan DNA too. Sometimes we just outcompeted them for resources without direct conflict. By 40,000 years ago, we were the only human species left. What happened to the others? We don't know for certain. Disease? Climate change? Direct conflict? Interbreeding until they were genetically absorbed? Probably all of these factors combined. But the result is clear. For the first time in millions of years, only one human species walked the earth. And that species was about to transform the entire planet, the Ice Age world. For the past 2.6 million years, Earth has been in an ice age, though not the way most people imagine. Ice ages aren't periods of constant freezing. They're epochs characterized by cyclical glaciations, periods when ice advances and retreats in regular rhythms. These cycles are driven by variations in Earth's orbit and axial tilt, the Milankovitch cycles named after the Serbian mathematician who described them. Every 100,000 years or so, Earth's orbit becomes more elliptical, bringing us closer to and farther from the Sun at different times of year. Every 41,000 years, the tilt of Earth's axis shifts. Every 26,000 years, Earth's axis slowly wobbles like a spinning top. These variations are small, but they affect how much sunlight different parts of Earth receive, and that's enough to trigger ice ages. During glacial periods, ice sheets miles thick covered northern continents. The Laurentide ice sheet covered most of Canada and the northern United States, reaching as far south as New York and Chicago. The Scandinavian ice sheet covered northern Europe. Smaller ice sheets formed in the Alps, Andes, and other mountain ranges. So much water was locked up in ice that sea levels dropped by up to 400 feet. Land bridges appeared, connecting continents, Alaska connected to Siberia across the Bering Land Bridge. Britain connected to Europe. Indonesia's islands formed a continuous landmass. Australia and New Guinea were joined. This Ice Age world shaped modern humans in profound ways. It was harsh, unpredictable, and dangerous, but it was also full of opportunity for clever, adaptable creatures. The mammoths and mastodons, woolly rhinos and giant ground sloths, the megafauna of the Ice Age, provided enormous amounts of meat for hunters clever enough to bring them down. A single mammoth could feed a group for weeks. Humans followed these herds across the land bridges, spreading to every continent except Antarctica. From Africa, we expanded into Europe and Asia by 100,000 years ago. We reached Australia by 65,000 years ago, crossing significant water gaps even during low sea levels, suggesting sophisticated boat-building skills. We entered the Americas perhaps 25,000 years ago, crossing the Bering Land Bridge during a glacial period when sea levels were low. Within just a few thousand years, humans had spread from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, the southern tip of South America, a distance of over 10,000 miles through every climate and ecosystem imaginable. And wherever we went, large animals soon went extinct. The correlation is too strong to ignore. Within 1,000 years of humans arriving in Australia, 85% of large animals disappeared. North America lost its mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, and American lions within 2,000 years of human arrival. Madagascar's giant lemurs and elephant birds vanished soon after humans colonized the island around 2,000 years ago. Was this our fault? The debate continues, but most scientists now believe hunting played a major role. These animals had never encountered human hunters before. They had no instinctive fear of us, no evolutionary adaptations to our hunting strategies. And we were devastatingly effective hunters. We didn't just kill animals one by one with spears. We used fire to drive herds off cliffs or into swamps. We dug pit traps. We hunted cooperatively, with planning and coordination no other predator could match. We were also wasteful. When mammoth meat was abundant, we could afford to take only the best parts and leave the rest. There are archaeological sites showing multiple mammoths killed at once, far more than could be eaten before spoiling. The climate was changing too. The Ice Age was ending, altering habitats. The extinctions probably resulted from both factors. Climate change stressed these animals, and human hunting pushed them over the edge into extinction. The last 12,000 years. Around 11,700 years ago, something changed. The Ice Age cycles, which had been alternating between glacial and interglacial periods for millions of years, entered a new interglacial phase. But this one was different, longer and more stable than previous warm periods. Climate warmed rapidly. Glaciers retreated. Sea levels rose, flooding coastal areas and cutting off land bridges. Britain separated from Europe. The Bering Land Bridge disappeared beneath the waves. Indonesia's islands separated. And in certain river valleys, the Nile in Egypt, the Tigris-Euphrates in Mesopotamia, the Indus in Pakistan, the Yellow River in China, conditions became perfect for something revolutionary: agriculture. Wild grasses with edible seeds, ancestors of wheat, barley, and rice, grew abundantly in these fertile valleys. For thousands of years, humans had gathered these seeds seasonally, grinding them into flour, eating them as porridge. Then someone noticed that seeds dropped near camp sprouted and grew. Someone experimented with deliberately planting seeds. Someone selected the largest seeds, the most productive plants, for next year's crop. Agriculture was invented independently multiple times in different parts of the world, and it changed everything. For the first time in history, people could produce more food than they immediately needed. This surplus allowed specialization. Not everyone had to farm. Some could make pottery to store grain. Some could work metal for tools and weapons. Some could become builders, priests, administrators, soldiers. Cities arose: Jericho, Çatalhöyük, Ur. These weren't just large villages, but true urban centers with thousands of inhabitants, specialized districts, monumental architecture. Writing was invented to track trade and taxation. Laws were codified, governments formed, kingdoms expanded, conquering neighbors and extracting tribute. In just a few thousand years, a blink of an eye in geological time, humans went from small bands of hunters to civilizations with cities, armies, agriculture, trade networks spanning continents, written histories, and complex social hierarchies. But civilization came with costs. Deforestation began as humans cleared land for agriculture. Soil erosion followed as farming depleted nutrients. Irrigation led to salinization, turning fertile land into wasteland. This is why many ancient civilizations, like Sumer, eventually collapsed. Diseases spread more easily in crowded cities than in scattered hunter-gatherer bands. Wars became more organized and deadly. Social inequality emerged, with rulers accumulating wealth while peasants barely survived. For most of human history, though, these impacts remained local. A civilization might destroy its own environment, but the planet as a whole remained largely unchanged by human activity. That began changing around 200 years ago with the Industrial Revolution. Part 5. The Modern Crisis. What we've done, let's talk about now, about what's happening to Earth in our lifetime. For 4.5 billion years, Earth's climate has been controlled by natural forces, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, orbital variations, slow changes in the sun's brightness, continental drift altering ocean currents. But over the last 200 years, a new force has emerged: humanity. We've added 1.5 trillion tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels. We've cleared half the world's forests. We've dammed most major rivers. We've filled the oceans with plastic and chemicals. We've driven species extinct at a rate not seen since the dinosaurs died. And Earth is responding. The evidence is undeniable. Average global temperature has risen 2 degrees Fahrenheit since 1880, with most of that warming occurring in the last 40 years. That might not sound like much, But remember, during the Ice Age that shaped human evolution, global average temperature was only 9 degrees cooler than today. Small changes in average temperature create massive effects. Arctic sea ice is disappearing. The oldest, thickest ice has declined by 95%. Summer ice extent is dropping by 13% per decade. By mid-century, the Arctic Ocean may be ice-free in summer for the first time in 100,000 years. Greenland's ice sheet is melting. It's losing about 280 billion tons of ice per year. That meltwater is flowing into the ocean, raising global sea level by about 1/8 of an inch each year. Antarctica is melting too, despite being much colder. The West Antarctic ice sheet has started an irreversible collapse. When it's gone, which could take centuries, but might happen faster, sea level will rise another 10 feet. Permafrost is thawing. Frozen ground that's been solid for thousands of years is melting across the Arctic. This releases methane, a greenhouse gas 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. This creates a feedback loop. Warming melts permafrost, which releases methane, which causes more warming, which melts more permafrost. What this means: sea level rise will displace hundreds of millions of people. Cities like Miami, New Orleans, Venice, Bangkok, and Dhaka will become uninhabitable. Entire island nations will disappear beneath the waves. Weather is becoming more extreme. Hurricanes are stronger because warm water fuels them, and ocean temperatures are rising. Droughts are longer and more severe because warming air holds more moisture, drying out some regions while dumping intense rainfall on others. Wildfires are larger and more frequent because forests are drier and fire seasons are longer. Ecosystems are collapsing. Coral reefs, home to 25% of marine species, are dying from heat, stress, and ocean acidification. Forests are shifting toward the poles, but they can't migrate fast enough to keep pace with climate change. Species are going extinct at a rate 100 to 1,000 times higher than natural background rates. This isn't a distant threat. This is happening now. The impacts are already being felt by millions of people, especially the world's poorest and most vulnerable. But there's still time. Here's the crucial point. We caused this, which means we can fix it. We know what needs to happen. Transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. Protect and restore forests and wetlands. Change agricultural practices to build soil instead of depleting it. Redesign cities to be more efficient and sustainable. Develop new technologies to remove carbon from the atmosphere. The technology exists. Solar and wind power are now cheaper than coal or natural gas in most places. Electric vehicles are becoming mainstream. Battery storage is improving rapidly. Beyond meat alternatives are getting better every year. What's needed is the collective decision to prioritize long-term survival over short-term profit. This isn't about saving the planet. Earth will be fine. It survived asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes, ice ages, and mass extinctions. Life recovered every time, eventually. This is about saving ourselves, creating a world where our children and grandchildren can thrive, not merely survive. Closing the long view. Tonight, you've journeyed across vast spans of time. You've seen Earth transform from a lifeless rock to a verdant paradise. You've watched as life conquered the land, took to the air, and gave rise to creatures of endless diversity. You've witnessed extinction events that wiped out most life on Earth, and you've seen how life always finds a way to recover, to adapt, to evolve into new forms. The story of Earth is a story of change, of challenge and response, of catastrophe and renewal. We stand now at a crossroads in that story. For the first time, one species, us, has the power to shape Earth's future. We can be a force of destruction, or we can be wise stewards of this precious world. The choice is ours. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember this: you are part of an unbroken chain stretching back nearly 4 billion years. Every ancestor of yours, from ancient single-celled organisms to the present day, survived long enough to reproduce. You carry their legacy in every cell of your body. You are made of star stuff, forged in ancient supernovas. You are the descendant of fish that learned to walk, apes that learned to think, and humans who learned to dream. You are a child of Earth, and Earth's story is your story. Sleep well, knowing that tomorrow you can help write the next chapter. Good night.